So I have these two bikes in my garage right now. This one on the left is my go-to everyday bike, and it cost well over $4,000, especially when you consider all of my modifications. And then this one is the Yadia Trooper 1, and it cost around 2,000 bucks. An extremely average mid-range bike. So I thought I'll take this opportunity to explain side by side exactly what is the difference between a $2,000 bike and a $4,000 bike. And let's actually begin with the similarities. So you're gonna notice that both are extremely attractive. So that goes to show that you do not need to pay $4,000+ to get a good looking bike. Many mid-range bikes, including the Rave Bullet GT, the X-Class, this, all look really good. So the Yadia in particular has a Super 73 inspired design. It has a tubular aluminum frame with a nice convenient basket in the middle. We have a super long squishy motorcycle style seat, a double crown front fork with BMX handlebars. And the design on my bike, of course it's different, but I think it looks just as attractive. Another similarity I'm sure you guys noticed is the fat tires. You do not have to spend 4,000 bucks to get the 20 by 4 inch wide fat tires that I'm such a huge fan of. You can see on my bike, I've recently upgraded to the Shinko 241 tires, and this is a huge reason why I'm a big fan of these wheels. They can accommodate a ton of different, very high quality motorcycle grade tires. I'll go ahead and leave the Amazon link to these tires below because they are by far my favorite tires of all time. And you could easily put them on a much cheaper bike with 20 by 4 inch wide fat tires. Another similarity is the brakes. I've noticed these days that just about all budget bikes give you hydraulic disc brakes. On the Yadia, we have dual piston hydraulic disc brakes, brand name Tektro. And coming over to my bike, we have, I think, the exact same brakes. Tektro dual piston hydraulic disc brakes. And the final similarity is often the motor. Of course, this can vary from bike to bike, but most of the time we're dealing with a nominal 750 watt geared hub motor, and often it's a Bafang hub motor. These are just the most common motors by far on the market, regardless of really the price point. So those are some similarities: the wheels, the aesthetics, the brakes, the motor. But let's get into some differences now, because of course, as you spend more money, you do get a nicer bike, but there is diminishing returns. But one big difference here is the frame material. So this bike uses steel. It's a steel frame. Another bike that has a steel frame is the Onyx RCR, and that bike has a price tag of around $4,500. And you can notice a difference between a steel bike and aluminum bike when riding. The steel bike just feels a lot more rigid and kind of like a Cadillac, and aluminum is more lightweight, which does have its benefits. But overall, I would say a steel frame is just higher quality and more premium. And speaking of more premium, that's the next benefit of a more expensive bike. All of the components are just better. So for example here, the rear shock is extremely high quality. It's from D&M. Same thing goes for the front suspension fork. It's KKE, 8 inches of travel. And the stanchions themselves are extra beefy, again adding to the rigidity of the overall bike. As you look closer, you're going to see that this uses a through axle, which is significantly more modern and robust than these ancient dropouts that all cheap e-bikes come with. This bike also features a direct mount handlebar stem attachment. And again, this is just a more expensive and higher quality piece, and it ensures that the handlebars are always properly aligned with the suspension fork. And the Trooper 1 has a more standard headset design here. And I noticed that right now it actually is a little bit misaligned. The handlebars are not perfectly perpendicular with the front wheel, which is super annoying. Now, oddly enough, the battery on this bike in particular is 20 amp hours, 48 volts, which is the exact same as the Yadia Trooper 1. 48 volts, 20 amp hours. Now, usually more expensive bikes come with a better, higher voltage battery, along with better controllers. The controller is crucial. A lot of people kind of overlook the controller, but along with the motor and battery, the controller is a crucial piece of the equation. And a lot of budget bikes, including the Yada Trooper 1, have a peak power of like 1300 watts. That means the controller has a maximum amperage output of like the low 20s. And a 20 to 25 amp controller really isn't that impressive. The peak output on the default controller on this bike, I think, was 30 to 35 amps. So immediately you can see it's a higher quality system. To give you another example here, the Wired Freedom is a very popular bike. The performance is out of this world. And one of the main reasons for that, along with the higher voltage battery, is the controller. That has a 40 amp controller. So it's an amazing controller, and it's what directly allows for the bike to have such amazing performance. And more often than not, that is one of the advantages of more expensive bikes over standard cheaper ones. And then finally, the suspension. This is so important. Do not overlook suspension. Good versus poor suspension is the #1 difference between expensive and cheaper bikes. And just to give you a visual, when I sit on the Trooper 1, this is what it looks like. And when I sit on my much more expensive bike, this is what it looks like. The difference really cannot be overstated, and it makes the bike way more enjoyable to actually want to ride. And the suspension by far is the main reason why, even though I have both these bikes in my garage, I always take my much more expensive bike. It's not because of the power, the acceleration, anything like that. It's because the suspension. Once you experience something this comfortable, it is very difficult to ever go back to something that doesn't perform as well. Now, you can always change out the shock in the back, maybe even the front fork, but it's going to cost you a lot. And you can never change the geometry, which has a big impact on the performance of the suspension components. So those are the main differences between a $2,000 bike and something that's $4,000 plus. The overall quality of the components, the steel frame versus aluminum, a through axle and a direct mount handlebar stem versus older dropouts and a standard headset, the superior electrical system, sometimes a higher voltage battery, but often a higher amperage controller that can just push more power to the motor. And the biggest difference of all, the suspension. True long travel adjustable front and rear suspension with good geometry is an absolute game changer. Most cheaper bikes are quote unquote full suspension, but the performance is just a completely different world than something like this. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did and you learned something, leave a like, subscribe. Greatly appreciated. I'm also working on more upgrades with this bike, and we'll be updating you guys soon. You probably noticed fenders and some other minute changes, but I also ordered a second battery. So soon, once that arrives, we're going to be showing you guys how to install a custom dual battery configuration. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one.